Our next guest is the founder of A Faith That Does Justice, a unifying ecumenical program that promotes social justice. Father Peter Gyves is a multilingual Jesuit priest who practiced as a pediatrician in poor communities such as El Salvador and in Guatemala during their Civil War years of the 1980s and early 1990s. He's also worked in several countries outside the United States, both as a physician and a priest, in both English and French-speaking African countries. How his program seeks to eliminate social and economic and racial divides is one of the questions we will be asking him this morning. So without further ado, Father Peter Gyves, welcome to Urban Update. A pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, tell us more about this idea of a faith that does justice, of founding that organization, why you saw a need for it to exist here in Boston.
Yeah, well, it really comes out of an experience I had in Central America during the civil wars in those countries, particularly El Salvador, Guatemala. And what I really discovered there was that many people with education have a faith that is somewhat intellectually based or dogma based, and what you realize down there is that these people were living out of a faith that was coming from the heart and led to action on behalf of justice for all people. And that had quite an impact on me, and quite frankly was transformational in my own life.
How did that influence your work, working down there, living down there during those civil wars?
Yeah, well, it was a difficult time. I mean, it was a country that was in utter turmoil, and I provided health care in some of the conflictive zones throughout the country to people who had been abandoned by the government at that time. And it was there in really dealing with people with limited access to housing as we would know it, or education or health care, that I really just realized this idea that the rampant injustice that was so hard to deny, and that from that came the idea of really my idea of recognizing a gift I had received from the people and wanting to really return that gift, and that's how the program really began.
Now, the big immigration news this week, as everyone knows, was the ending of the humanitarian program known as TPS for Salvadorans, which says nearly 200,000 Salvadorans here in the U.S. must leave. How does that affect the people in the community that you've come to know here? Yeah,
well, 200,000 people in the country are affected, and in Boston, we have, in East Boston, a tremendous number of Central Americans, predominantly El Salvador and Guatemala. So there is a direct connection to Boston with this, that these people, if this temporary protective status is rescinded, they would have a year and a half to get out of the country. Now, the irony is that there's almost 200,000 children who have been born of these people in this country, so they're citizens. And what you're going to have now is, well, they move out parents of some of these people, it's going to be incredibly disruptive to families and disruptive to the income of these families.
Well, you have a situation where they may split families, or they bring children back to countries that they know nothing about.
Exactly. Many of these children have never been back to, they know nothing about El Salvador or Guatemala. They're in schools here. They are really connected to life in this country.
Now, your organization's hosting a number of workshops, that bring English-speaking and non-English-speaking people together. Talk to me about what those workshops are like.
Yeah, the workshops are faith-based. It's the idea, really, though, of moving from a faith that is in the mind or a faith that is based in dogma to really moving to society where people live the values of their faith. I've often said to people, while Jews, Christians, and Muslims may disagree in their dogma, a good Christian, a good Jew, and a good Muslim basically should be working for the same thing, and that's for a just society.
Now, last fall, you held 2 community meetings, one around the issues of immigration and the other around homelessness. Your next one's going to be in March. What do you hope to achieve on that one?
Yeah, in March we hope to do something on racism in Boston and throughout the United States. Being that this is Martin Luther King month, we want to try and follow that up with really trying to explore with speakers a little bit more in depth some of the issues that face the vulnerable people of Boston, which are many communities. It's the African American community, but you also have many, many Latin Americans here, Haitians and other countries as well, who are experiencing difficult times related to that.
Okay, and Peter, well, thank you for coming in. One last word on just how do you fund your initiatives and for anybody who wants to get involved?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Our funding is basically through donors. We invite people to come in, learn about us, and if they're willing to participate in our programs, they can donate at www.faith-justice.org, or they can write to us by email at info@faith-justice.org.
Okay, and I know you've got an English as a second language class coming up later this year. That ought to be very good. Father Peter Gyves, thank you for coming in very much, and good luck with your program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, and we'll be right back after this.